All right, so everybody find a comfortable seat to start practice today. And I invite you here right now just to start moving into your body, just starting to wake up those parts of the body that might be a little bit sleepy. You can take some circles around the hips. This is nice for the low back. You can interlace your fingers and reach them up to the sky and move side to side. Maybe the movement is just in the head and the neck. Just starting to awaken the body, starting to move into the body today. And then slowly and easy, starting to settle into a seated position, into some stillness. Your hands can come anywhere where they are comfortable, whether that's on the thighs or in a mudra, whatever feels best for you today. And I invite you to close your eyes, starting to settle into the practice, starting to notice your breath, noticing the quality of the breath, the quantity of the breath, where you feel your breath. So maybe you feel that up into your heart space. Maybe it's more into the belly. And starting to take that breath even deeper. So really filling up the belly with breath. Maybe you can sit up a little bit taller. And feeling this expansion as it grows through the body. Feeling the sit bones rooted against the earth, the breath traveling up the length of the spine, feeling that tallness. Noticing the weight of your hands wherever they're resting. Noticing the sounds around you, the smells. Bringing all of your five senses into this practice, into this moment. Getting curious about the moment. And all the while, still continuing to deepen that breath. So each breath is growing a little bit bigger than the one before. Maybe taking off the armor that you are wearing today. Allowing yourself to open your heart and open your body, being receptive to this practice and this process. Taking a few more deep breaths here, preparing the body for the movement. And as you come to your next breath, you can keep your eyes closed or open them to a soft gaze. And we'll start with a moving meditation. So with your next exhale, begin to take your gaze over the right shoulder. And inhale to come back to center. And exhale to take the gaze over the left shoulder. Taking the entire breath to move. Inhale, coming back to center, and exhale to the right. Inhale comes back to center, and exhale to the opposite side. Noticing the movement in the neck, noticing the shoulders, allowing the thoughts to settle on the breath. And take one more visit to each side of the body. Coming back to center, there's no rush. You'll find that position as you arrive. Bring the arms out in front of you with the opposite hand to the opposite elbow, so like a genie. And tuck that chin in slightly so you have that length in the back of the neck. And take your gaze over the right shoulder, and this time hold it. If your eyes are closed, to open them so you can glance over. Maybe find a spot where you can look, where you notice the movement or the range of motion in the neck. And then coming back to center and looking over the opposite shoulder. Again, noticing, taking this awareness of your surroundings, noticing the movement in the neck. Coming back to center, and then we're gonna move the elbows from side to side so the sit bones stay rooted onto the earth, and just moving as fast or as slow as you would like. There's a slight twist into the belly area, into the torso. And it might feel a little funny. Just trying to find some movement, some openness into the shoulders. Taking just a few more deep breaths here, staying with that breath that we established at the beginning of practice. And then coming back to center into stillness, arms still at that genie-like position. And take a look over the right shoulder and notice if there's a little bit more range of motion here. Notice if you could move or glance over the shoulder a little bit more. And coming back to center and then over to the opposite shoulder. Again, just noticing, maybe it feels a little bit more open, a little less tension, a little bit like magic. Bringing the hands back down to your lap. And this time we'll take that right ear toward the right shoulder, just being mindful that you're not pressing the chin forward, that the chin is tucked in, so we're still finding some length and alignment on the neck. So with the ear toward the right shoulder, then the left hand moves out off of the lap, reaching out toward the left side. Reaching through the left set of fingertips toward the earth. Letting both shoulders soften, but especially the left shoulder. If you feel like your shoulders are rolling inward, like you're collapsing into that chest, feel as if you're rolling the shoulders backward and down, and a slight squeeze of the shoulder blades against the spine. And 3 deep breaths into the left side of the neck. Allowing that breath to dissipate the tension, anything that you're holding on your shoulders, then maybe you can begin to let go of. And for the last couple of breaths, keep reaching through the left set of fingertips and maybe try to take the gaze down toward the right side of your body or of your mat. So the chin moves down slightly. You can even think about your nose moving down toward the earth. Notice how that changes the position. Again, a deep breath as you lengthen the left hand down to the earth. Feel that slight squeeze of the shoulder blades against the spine. Lift the chin back up and stack the neck on top of the rest of the spine so you're back to center. Take the right hand down toward the earth and then begin to sweep the left hand overhead so we're in a side bend. Beautiful. Breathing deep here into the side body. Both sit bones rooted evenly. The rib cage is down and back. Feel that opening on the back of the body. So if we thrust our rib cage forward, you can feel that here, that you're actually closing off the back of the body. When we bring the bottom of the rib cage down and flush with the abdominal wall, we're opening into the back side of the body so we can find and breathe into the lowest part of the lungs. Take one more full breath here, feeling that breath in between the ribs into the intercostal muscles. And with your next inhale, coming back up to center, both hands reach up. Here, interlace your fingers and then press the palms up toward the sky. And maybe take some circles around with the shoulders, into the rib cage, even into the hips, almost like a cat and cow like motion. You can bend one elbow closer as it drags down toward the earth or toward your hip. Notice the breath, keeping that breath strong and smooth and even. And then coming back to center and bringing the hands back down to the lap. Again, finding that alignment in the back of the neck so that that palate is moved back. And this time the left ear moves toward the left shoulder. The right hand comes away from the lap as the right hand reaches down toward the earth. Shoulders are even, they're wrapped in toward the back so that the shoulder blades are squeezing the spine without thrusting the rib cage forward. So we want to keep that alignment in the body. And sending that breath to the side of the neck, finding some space there. We carry a lot of shoulds and coulds and woulds on our shoulders. So breathing into those, letting them go. Take one more breath here. And then begin to tilt the chin down toward the earth or pointing the nose down toward the earth. Just getting a different stretch on the side of the neck. And taking 3 deep breaths here. Notice both shoulders. So we want the shoulders on both sides even. So the left ear is not coming up to the ear. Noticing the body in space. Keep reaching through the right set of fingertips. With your next inhale, stacking the neck on top of the rest of the spine. This time the left hand comes down to the earth and begin to sweep that right hand overhead. Side body stretch. Both sit bones against the earth evenly, softening the shoulder on the left side. There's a small micro bend in that elbow. And deep breathing along the right side of the body. Opening up here. Let your breath be the movement. Take one more big breath. And then inhale to come back up to center. Both hands reach up and exhale, hands down into your heart center. A nice moment to set an intention for your practice, a reason why you showed up today, something that will carry you along. And whenever you are ready, starting to make your way on to your hands and your knees. So setting up in this tabletop position, your toes can be tucked underneath you, or you can bring the lace side of your shoes toward the earth, whatever you feel most comfortable. Knees are right underneath your hips, wrists right underneath your shoulders, and pressing into all 10 pads of the fingers. So when you press into the 10 pads of your fingers, your palm might pop up a little bit. We're just taking the pressure off of the wrists. With your inhale, begin to lift the tailbone up toward the ceiling. And then with your exhale, rounding the tailbone towards your heels. Some pelvic tilts. For right now, this movement is just in the pelvis. Inhale to lift the tailbone up. And exhale to round the tailbone toward the heels. Taking the entire breath to move. That peak of the pose will be the peak of your breath. Moving with your own perfect breath pace. As you come to your next exhale with that rounded tailbone toward the earth, start to take that curve into the rest of the spine, slowly moving with each vertebra. So first the tailbone, the low back, the mid back, the shoulders, and the neck. And then inhale to begin to move out of that pose into a long spine with the tailbone moving last. We'll take a couple more of those. Exhale, tailbone starts to curl, bringing that curve into the rest of the spine, breathing space in between each vertebra. And the inhale begins to lengthen out the spine. One last time. Exhaling to bring that curve into the back. And flattening out the back with the inhale. We'll all end in that tabletop position. From this tabletop position, start to walk your hands forward. Both hands reach forward so that you can start to lower yourself down onto your belly. From the belly, we'll start with the forearms forward, the lace side of your shoes down toward the earth. With your forearms out in front of you, Drag the forearms back. You may physically move them back slightly or just feel energetically. And as you move the forearms back, squeezing the shoulders onto the back of the body, hugging the spine, and feeling as if you're pulling your heart forward. Take 3 breaths here. Press the lace side of the shoe down to the earth. The pubic bone also presses down to the earth, opening up the heart. You can look over one side, either the right or the left shoulder. And then coming back to center and looking over the opposite shoulder, maybe getting a different stretch along the neck. Coming back to center and then coming back onto your belly. From your belly, stretch your right hand out to the right side. So you're walking the fingers a little bit further than you think. I'll show you on the opposite. So the hand walks over, and then we're gonna roll on to the right side of the body. From this shoulder pigeon, you can bring both knees stacked on top of one another like a fetal position. That'll protect the back a little bit. Or you can keep the legs stretched out in front of you if you like that position more. If your legs are stretched out, you can bend the left knee up toward the ceiling and bring the left foot behind the leg. Let the head be supported by the earth, or if you have a blanket or a pillow nearby that would feel a little bit better, you can do that. You should be feeling a nice stretch on the front of the shoulder. So if you don't feel that, walk your hands or your fingers a little bit more outward or up or down to find that spot. 8 breaths here. Breathing to the sensation. Notice the moment. Again, noticing all of those senses. Feeling the breath move down to the belly, expanding the belly button away from the low back. Those long, smooth, deep breaths. Find the fullness to the breath and the emptiness. Two more breaths here. Taking the tongue off of the roof of the mouth, softening through the jaw. We'll start to roll back onto your belly, sliding the right hand underneath the shoulder. Hands come underneath both shoulders to press yourself up to hands and knees. And back into a child's pose. So whichever variation of child's pose that you prefer, you can Drape the torso over the knees to get a deeper stretch in the low back. Or you can take the knees about mat distance apart, letting the hips sink in between. Coming back to the breath. You can roll that space between your eyebrows, your third eye along the mat for like a little massage. With your next breath, with your next exhale, start to walk your hands over to the right side of the mat, pressing or pulling into the earth, allowing the head to hang heavy. And think about accentuating the crease in the left hip. So we're sitting that left hip a little bit deeper, breathing in to the left side of the body. For the next 3 to 5 breaths, inhale from the left side of the body and exhale through the right. Find a little bit more space, a little bit more surrender or softness in the sides of the body. Inhale to come back to center and come up onto the hands and the knees. From this hands and knees position, breathe the right hand out to the side and up toward the ceiling, and then thread that right hand through the left side, coming into thread the needle, coming to lay onto the outside of the right shoulder. Your left hand can stay underneath your shoulder with the elbow bent in 90 degrees. It can also reach forward, or you can take a bind where you take the back of your hand to your kidney or in grabbing to the inside of the right thigh. Open up through the shoulder if you take that bind. You can also have the option of stretching that left leg out to the side. If you don't feel this in the back of your shoulder, sit your hips back a little bit, bringing the stability into the hips and taking the twist more into the thoracic spine. 3 to 5 breaths here. Where can you move your breath to find more depth in the body? Can you breathe so deeply to the very bottom of the lungs that it feels as if you're breathing into the hips? Two more breaths here. Softening where you can soften. As you come to the end of your next breath, there is no rush. Beginning to come out of this pose and unwind. So bringing the left hand underneath the shoulder so you can use that as leverage. Inhaling the right hand out and up. And bringing the hand back down to the earth. Take some hip circles here. Maybe the hips move in that circle-like position or in that circle way, or you can just take your hips to one side and then the other, staying on any side as long as you would like. And making your way back to center. That hands and knees position. Shoulders over your wrists, hips over your knees. With your inhale, lift your right arm out in front of you and your left leg back behind you. Keeping the bottoms of the rib cage down, flush with the abdominal wall, reaching the hand forward and the ankle backward. Keep a flex in your foot. Keep a bend in your left elbow, reaching from the side of the body. At the same time as you're reaching in these opposite directions, you're also hugging into a center line. Take a deep breath here. With your next exhale, listen carefully. Bring the right hand down to the earth. Kickstand the right foot off the side of the mat and start to open into Vashisthasana or side plank. You can keep that left leg lifted or you can bring it down to the earth. The side of the foot comes down to the earth. Your hand can be reaching up toward the ceiling or overhead. No matter where you are, lifting up through that right hip and pressing the pelvis forward. That way we're not turning the chest or our torso down toward the earth, we're opening it. So the left shoulder is stacked on top of the right and the left hip is stacked on top of the right hip. Take one more big breath here, opening up as deeply as you can. And exhale to come back down to your hands and your knees, unwinding. Taking any pose of choice here for 3 breaths as your transition. You can take a child's pose or a downward facing dog or any movement, moving into the hips, anything you want. Listening intuitively into the body. One more full round of breath. And then wherever you are, finding yourself back into your hands and knees position. Sitting back onto your heels, pressing the palms to the earth with the fingers pointing back towards you for a nice deep wrist stretch. So the deeper that you bend your elbows, the deeper the stretch on the wrist is going to be. 3 deep breaths here. Find the softness in your face, relaxing the jaw and the forehead. Sending the breath into the wrists. And then slowly peeling the hands off of the earth. You can do the same things with the back of the hands toward the earth. This time the elbows point out, pressing the back of the hands. Just a nice counter stretch, taking a deep breath here. And then shaking out the hands, rolling the wrists, whatever you want. And then we'll do that same sequence on the other side. So as you shake out your wrists or roll your wrists, maybe a nice time to check in with the body, noticing each side of your body. We started with the right side. Maybe you have a little bit more space, a little less tension there. As you're ready, coming back down to your hands and your knees, walking your hands out in front of you, squeezing the shoulder blades on the back of the body as you lower onto your belly. Starting with that Sphinx pose, forearms out in front of you, dragging the forearms energetically back, squeezing the shoulder blades on the back of the body, opening through your heart, pressing the pubic bone down, and as if it's dragging forward as well. If there's any pinching in the low back, finding a little bit more length or lowering yourself down to the earth. Press the lace side of the shoe into the earth, taking a deep breath here, opening up through your heart space. And with your next exhale, coming all the way down onto your belly. And this time the left arm reaches out to the side, walking the fingers a little bit further so you can roll onto the left side of the body. Again, you have that option to stack the knees on top of one another or straighten the legs, bending the right knee toward the ceiling and the right foot comes behind the left. Explore the pose by walking the fingers up or down. Maybe reaching the fingertips a little bit further to open up through the front of your heart. Several deep breaths here. Where can you deepen your breath? Where can you find softness for the last few breaths of this pose? Begin to unwind, coming back down to your belly. Both hands underneath the shoulders and press yourself up to your hands and knees and all the way back into a child's pose. Reconnect with your breath here. With your next exhale, start to walk the hands over to the left side of the mat. As active or as passive as you would like. Think about increasing the hip, the right hip, sending it deeper to the right side. Breathing into the right side and out the left. Find those intercostal muscles in between each rib with your breath. Expanding, finding more flexibility and space into the sides of your body. With your next inhale, walking the hands back to center and beginning to rise up onto your hands and your knees. This time, the right hand stays planted. Breathe the left arm out to the side and up toward the ceiling. And then thread that left hand through the space on the right side, coming to lay on the back of the left shoulder. Lots of options here. Choose your variation. It can be the same or it can be different as when you did it on the opposite side. If you don't feel the stretch, sending the hips a little bit deeper over the heels. And 3 to 5 breaths here. Relax the jaw, soften through your forehead. Meet the sensation with your breath. Start to slide the right hand underneath the shoulder so you can press into the right hand and unwind. Breathing the left hand out and up toward the ceiling. And the hand comes back down to the earth. This time we will lift the left hand off of the earth and the right leg back behind you. Finding that spinal balance here. So we're moving in all sorts of directions. Keeping that right foot flexed. Find even more length through the sides of the body. So rather than reaching through the shoulder so that the shoulder reaches forward and becomes higher than the right shoulder, think about keeping the shoulders parallel and the hips parallel and reaching through the belly button or finding more length from your center. Keep hugging in. Find one more long inhale. And then the left hand comes down to the earth, the right leg stays lifted, and kickstand the left leg off to the side, moving into Vashisthasana. Hips stack on top of one another, shoulders stack on top of one another. You can keep reaching the arm up toward the ceiling or overhead. Breathing into the side of the body. So lots of side body work today. Find more length. Take one more deep breath and exhale to come back down to the earth. Take some hip circles. Coming as far forward as feels good for you, taking the circles as fast or as slow as you would like. If you haven't switched directions, do that now. And eventually making your way back to center, sitting back onto your heels. Taking a minute here, lifting the shoulders up toward the ears, rolling the shoulders onto the back, squeezing the shoulders as the shoulder blades move down toward the hips. We'll do that again. Inhale to lift the shoulders up, squeezing the shoulders on the back of the body, and exhale to release the shoulder blades down the length of the back. One last time, lifting shoulders up with your inhalation. Exhale to squeeze shoulders on the back of the body and lowering them down the back. From this hero-like position, interlace your fingers at your back, squeeze the elbows together, keep that rib cage down. So as we're in this position, we're not thrusting the rib cage forward here. The rib cage is down so that the whole canister of the torso is even. Shoulders don't hug up to your ears. They're also soft down the back and open up through the heart. If you would like a little bit more, you can keep your fingers here on the tailbone or the hip area, or you can start to lengthen the hands down toward the earth. Take 3 deep breaths here. So I like to think of this pose or the breath in this pose as like that Care Bear stare. I hope you guys all watched Care Bears when you were little. So think about just shining your heart like that Care Bear. And then if you would like to, for the last couple of breaths, you can start to bow forward, bringing your forehead to the earth and lifting the hands up toward the ceiling, getting even deeper into the shoulders. Very nice. When I teach kids classes, this is shark pose. So you can do that with your kids later. Start to release out of this pose, coming back up and releasing the hands. And if you have a block or a stool or a stack of books, you can grab that. It's not necessary, but it might help in these lunge poses just for a little bit of stability. Bringing the right foot forward. And keep the toes a little bit further out. We're going to move a little bit deeper into this pose, and we want the knees stacked over the ankle. So to start, the knee might be behind the ankle a little bit. So press down through the knee on the left knee. And if you want a little bit of more padding, you can always curl your mat under so you have an extra layer there. So press the knee down to the earth and then energetically bringing or sliding that right heel back and the left knee forward, and then hugging in between both inner thighs. So we're finding that midline of the body and hugging in, squeezing to it, just as if you were holding a block between both thighs. And then start to move forward. So putting those boundaries on the legs just helps keep, so we're not dumping into one side. We're not compromising the pose in any way. And once you move your hips forward slightly, we're keeping the hips pointed forward. So if you find those hip bones, those stay forward rather than tilting the pelvis. So we're not tilting the pelvis in order to get deeper into this pose. We're just shifting the hips forward. Once you find that position, taking 3 deep breaths, keeping that energy in the legs. If you want to move a little bit deeper into this pose, you can reach your arms up. Notice the shoulders as you reach your arms up. So we want a lot of energy reaching up through the fingertips, but if it's compromising or hurting your shoulders, you can always take those arms into a wide V. One more deep breath, breathing into the belly, expanding. The belly is soft, the back is strong. And then hands come back down to your block or to the earth and start to shift the hips over the left heel, straightening the right leg, keeping a small micro bend in that right knee. The right foot is flexed, so the toes point up toward the ceiling, and then a slight shift of the right hip back. That'll deepen the pose, deepen the stretch on the back of the hamstring. Send the sit bones back behind you, finding a little bit more length. And then deepen the breath. This is a very deep stretch, a very intense stretch. Notice where you're trying to avoid the intensity and soften around it. So use the breath here. For the next few breaths, you have several pieces to the hamstring or the back of the thigh. So to get into all of those pieces, start to take like in an outer rotation. It'll be very subtle. Take the, kind of move that right foot toward the pinky side, and we'll take a deep breath there. It won't be a big movement. And then start to come back to center and start to move the foot, keeping that flexion toward the big toe. So we're getting into the kind of the inner part of the hamstring. Take a deep breath there. And come back to center. And then bring a bend back into that right knee. And you can let the hips move forward here. Getting a deep stretch into the front of the hip flexor and psoas on the left side. We're going to go a little bit deeper from here. Walk your right foot out to the side of the mat, toes slightly wider than your heel. Keep your sit bones reaching back behind you. So if you can see that, when I reach my sit bones back behind me, it shifts my hips back so that my hips start to line up a little bit more with my left thigh. And then hands come in front of you. And just as we did in that Sphinx-like position, you're gonna drag your hands forward and start to move your heart, drag your hands backward and start to move your heart forward. You can walk your right foot a little bit more forward if you would like. Keep those sit bones moving back so the hips are lifted. You can stay right here. This is lizard pose, or you can start to come down onto one forearm and then the other. You can also use a prop, whether that's a block or a stack of books, to come down into this lizard pose. So the reason that we keep our hips lifted is that we don't want to just dump into this hip area, because then we're just putting a lot of pressure on all of that, all of the hips, just everything, all of the tendons and everything. So keeping those hips lifted, and we'll take 3 more deep breaths here. Keep feeling like you're moving forward, getting deeper into the front of the hip and the hip flexor. Deepen the breath, don't cut off your breath. And then press into both hands to lift the torso. You can move your prop out of the way, start to walk the foot back forward, and eventually bringing that right knee back to meet the left. Take your hips over to the right side. We're gonna stay here this time. So you can stay in this stillness, going as deep as you would like, or kind of rocking forward and backward to get a little bit more into the hips. Nice job. Find your breath. So even in these transition pieces or poses, we're not allowing the breath to stop or stall or become short. We're not allowing our mind to move into whatever is coming next. We're still in this moment with our breath in our bodies. And coming back to center, sitting back onto the heels in that hero's pose. And we'll do that same sequence on the other side. So this time, the left knee comes forward. Again, if you want to have a little extra padding, you can double over your mat. The left toe's a little bit more forward, and then put on those boundaries. So press down through the right knee. Energetically, the right knee moves forward and the left heel shifts back. The headlights of your hips stay straight as you start to move deeper into this stretch. Once you find that, you can lift your arms up. If you would like, they can stay down at your hips as well if that feels better. Notice the shoulders. Kind of want to squeeze the shoulders on the back of the body so that you're opening up through the heart. And then you can keep your arms wide. Keep that energy moving through. Keep pressing down through the foot and the knee. Feel as if you're rooting down through the knee and that foot to rise up, find more length. Breath is still in the belly. Belly is soft, back is strong. Take a couple more deep breaths here. And then the hands come back down to frame the foot or to your prop, whichever. And start to shift the hips back over the right heel so that the left leg straightens with a small micro bend in that left knee. Flex the left foot, toes point up to the ceiling, and shifting of the left hip back. That's gonna deepen the stretch. We want the hips right in alignment with the other. So one hip is not shifted forward. Maybe you can see that better like this. One hip is not shifted forward. They're both on the same. That's that shift back of the left hip. And breathing deep into the hamstrings. Take the tongue off of the roof of your mouth. The tension in your jaw, soften and relax. The forehead. Bringing the mind to the breath. Deepening the breath. Still the breath is growing bigger than the one before. There's the expansion, then the contraction, that ebb and flow. Soften through the shoulders. And again, we're going to take the last few breaths of this pose to get into the entire hamstring. So first, keeping that flexion in the foot, start to take or move that foot as if the pinky side is going to move toward the earth. It's just a very subtle movement, but it'll change the stretch. You can maybe feel it more on the outside. One deep breath. Coming back to center and moving the foot over toward the big toe. Again, stretching, maybe you can feel it in your calf a little bit, moving more to the inside or the outside, just a different stretch. Coming back to center and then shifting forward, bringing a bend back into that knee. Here you can let the hips go. Maybe this feels really nice just to let the hips go, take those boundaries off of the legs. Deep breaths into the front of the hip. And then setting up for lizard pose on this side. So walking the foot over to the outside of the mat. Hands come to the inside of the heel. And again, shifting the sit bones back to keep the hips high so we're not sinking into that right hip. This is a perfect place to stay. You can also go a little bit more intense by coming down onto the forearms or bringing the forearms onto the block. But I challenge you to keep your hips lifted here. Deepen the breath to match the sensation. Let the inner body support you here. That inner body is your breath. Notice if you're avoiding the pose by the mind and the thoughts starting to take you out of your body. Stay in your body. Invite your mind back in. Deepen the breath. You can do anything for 2 more breaths. After the second breath, start to pick yourself back up. If you're down on your forearms, pressing your hands into the earth. Start to walk the foot back to center, and eventually the left knee comes back to meet the right. And we'll take our hips over to the left side. Again, you have the option here to just be still, breathing into the outside of the hip, or if you want a little bit of a massage, you can come move a little bit forward and backward. Notice the breath. And coming back up to center. Crossing your ankles or sitting back onto your heels and sitting over. Finding your seat in the middle of your mat. So you can slide onto your back, bringing your knees into your chest, moving from side to side, taking some circles around the tailbone, massaging out your low back. From this position, keep your right knee into your chest and lower your left foot down to the earth. So the left knee is pointing up toward the ceiling. And then flex your right foot and cross your right ankle over the left knee. The right knee moves forward and out toward the right side of the room. This is a perfect place to stay in this reclined pigeon or figure 4, or you can start to thread your hands to the back of the left thigh and bring the legs in closer to you for a deeper stretch. You can find a little bit of movement here. You can stay in this stillness. No matter where you are, deepen your breath. Long, smooth, and steady breathing. Soften the jaw, the forehead, the shoulders. Two more breaths here. We're gonna take this into what I like to call twidgeon. So it is a twisted pigeon. So what you're going to do is take your right foot, that foot should be flexed, so that's the one crossed over your left knee or thigh, and you're gonna take that right foot down to the earth on the left side. So the hips twist, your arms can come out to a T, and you can take your gaze over the right shoulder. take 5 breaths here. With your next inhale, start to pick up the legs, bringing them back to center. With your peace fingers, wrap those peace fingers around your big toe on the right side. You can stretch your left foot out in front of you and coming into a half happy baby. So the right knee comes to the outside of the elbow. And notice that lengthening on the front of your left hip here. So finding some length and openness, some space into that hip flexor and psoas. And releasing the foot, bringing the right foot down to the earth. And we'll pick up the left knee, flex the left foot, and cross the left ankle over the right knee. Again, the left knee moves toward the left and forward. This may be the end of your pose. It's a perfect place. Or if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can thread your hands through the space between the thighs and bring the right knee in closer to your chest. Deepen the breath. If your breath and your mind and your body have disconnected, bringing them back together, coming into this moment. Acknowledging what might be coming up, might be releasing from the hips. Taking just a few more breaths. Release the tension in the jaw, the forehead, the shoulders. Soften where you can, surrendering into this pose. As you feel balanced here in this hip stretch from side to side, starting to move into that Twidgen. So this time the left foot comes down to the outside of the right side of the body. Arms come to a T or a cactus, and you can take your gaze over the left side. The breath is your movement here in this pose, so keeping that breath full. Feeling the strength of the breath and also the surrender, that softness to the breath. And then allowing yourself to evolve over this pose, trusting the practice. Being patient with the process. Taking everything just one breath at a time. Start to unwind, coming back to center. This time the right leg stretches out in front of you. Peace fingers come to the big toe on the left side and opening into half happy baby on the opposite side. Keep reaching through that right heel to find a little bit more space and length in the front of the hip or the hip flexor and the psoas. And then bringing the left foot down to the earth. Both knees point up. Start to take some windshield wipers. Here, moving the knees side to side. You can move with your breath, finding your own rhythm, or you can stay on one side a little bit longer, just keeping that full breath. And eventually stretching your legs out in front of you. You can take a big full body stretch with your arms reaching back behind you. And hands come down to the side, setting up for your final resting pose. This pose that we have prepared all of practice for. The stillness, the peace. Taking the breath into its more natural state. Shavasana. Be present. Be here. Feel yourself against the earth, belly rising and falling. Be open and receptive. Listen to your entire body. Hear yourself. Hear the silence between the inhale and the exhale. There is no rush. Hear yourself. Hear the silence between the inhale and the exhale. Start to bring breath back into your body, filling up with this prana energy. Starting to move your fingers, your toes, rolling through your wrists and your ankles, maybe even moving your head from side to side. Become aware of your surroundings, relishing in all of your senses, softening your armor. And begin to move on to either side of your body into a nurturing or a fetal position. Taking a few deep breaths here, honoring yourself and your practice, for showing up on your mat, taking this time for you, and using the strength of your arms, starting to press yourself up to a seat, allowing the head and the neck to follow last. Your eyes can stay closed or at a soft gaze in front of you. And bring one hand to your heart. You can stay with one hand there or both hands. And tenderly press into your heart to feel that connection. Maybe even doing a little bit of a rub, some circles, and taking a deep breath together. Breathing all together in this community. And then bringing both your palms together at your heart center and bowing your head. Thank you so much for letting me guide you through your practice today. The light in me honors and recognizes the light, strength, beauty, and grace in all of you. Namaste.